Welcome to Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape Podcast. Hosted by Dr. Holly Krutka, Executive Director of the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. The show highlights SER's role supporting our mission to promote energy-driven economic development for the state of Wyoming.
On today's podcast episode, we're touching on the topic of rare earth elements, which have been in the news a lot lately, and specifically research around REEs, as they're called, in the Center for Economic Geology Research in the minerals team. We're going to talk about why rare earth elements and research around those are critical opportunities, pun intended, because they are critical minerals, and opportunities for the state of Wyoming, both conventionally and unconventionally, as well as for our students here at the University of Wyoming. So I have two incredible guests today. I'm going to let them introduce ourselves. So Davin, why don't you go first?
Oh, thank you, Holly. Davin Bagdonas. I'm a research scientist here at SER in the Center for Economic Geology Research, and I study coal and rare earth elements.
And Tyler?
Thank you, Holly. I am Tyler Brown. I'm the interim program manager for the minerals team here in the Center for Economic Geology Research.
And you both hold graduate degrees from the University of Wyoming. So can you talk about that, what you studied in your graduate degree, and then what brought you here to the School of Energy Resources? And again, we'll start with you, Davin.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So I graduated with a master's degree in 2015. That was in igneous petrology. I studied Neo-Archean granites.
Okay, so, and that means what?
Those are very old granites that compose a large portion of Wyoming.
Cool. And that was with the geophysics department.
It was under Susan Swap and Carol Frost.
Okay, and Tyler, how about you?
I got my PhD in geology. I was studying gabbros and volcanic basalts from the bottom of the ocean.
What's a gabbros?
It is a suite of igneous minerals, plagioclase, olivine, pyroxene, too technical for
Oh my gosh, you geologists.
This podcast.
Okay, we'll just keep going. There is like a running joke, I think, that geologists make the most complicated terms up, maybe other than the medical profession. So you're good job keeping in line with that. Is that required to keep your PhD?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about rare earth elements and critical minerals. So first of all, what do those terms mean? Tyler, why don't you start?
Well, a critical mineral is defined as a non-fuel mineral or mineral material that is vital in the manufacture or end use of a product that is essential for the United States of America. Not only that, but the U.S. is reliant upon the import of those mineral materials. So we are subject to potential disruptions in the supply chain.
So it really is something that the government is designating these minerals, but rare earths are like a class of elements.
Correct. So actually most of the critical mineral list are mostly elements. There are a few minerals themselves, but most of them are elements. The rare earth elements are a subset of those critical minerals. They involve 17 different elements, all of the lanthanides plus yttrium and scandium. More
yttrium.
Technical.
I love that one. Okay, so is there anything you want to add, Davin, on that?
No, that was great.
Okay, so then talk about how did rare earth element and critical mineral research really start here at the School of Energy Resources?
So surprisingly, as we're looking at this question, 10 years ago, the state of Wyoming provided an initial seed fund to begin looking at coal byproducts. There was some interest at that time in regard to fly ash. So we surveyed all of the power stations in the state of Wyoming. That's when I was hired to come in and begin that survey, or complete that survey. I guess it had begun a few months prior. I didn't expect much, and the data was surprising. We found rare earth elements in a number of coal waste products, and the research really began in earnest then. In 2018, we started to work with coal directly. So we were pulling coal core with industry partners in Wyoming. Department of Energy, National Energy Technology Lab became involved and reached out to us to assist them in methods development and ways to start looking at the unconventional side of these prospects in Wyoming.
And you publish, or you were, I think, the lead author on a paper on that topic. Can you talk about like where that was published, if people were interested in it?
Yeah, so the big paper we put out was Renewable and Sustainable Energy Review. It was a little surprising to get into that journal at the time. I didn't expect the idea behind fly ash, especially Wyoming fly ash, to go that far. But really, we looked at what's available in Wyoming, what's available technology-wise to get the rare earths out of it. And we wrote that paper around this idea that we see this large potential prospect for rare earth elements.
And you really, over the years, built that into a program that continues to grow. So talk about what the minerals team is working on now and what you've just finished. Maybe in reverse order there.
Yeah. It has. It's continued to grow. I have really pushed this idea of the fly ash resource because we have so much of it. So what we're working on now has expanded from that work in what we call the CORCM space. So that's a program under the U.S. Department of Energy. It's their largest critical minerals program. It stands for Carbon Ore, Rare Earth Elements, and Critical Minerals. It began in coal basins, so there were 13 original projects. School of Energy Resources landed 2 of those, and we covered the entire state of Wyoming. Those projects completed last year. Those final reports are available. The Powder River Basin, Tyler worked with Aaron Phillips, Dr. Phillips, on that one, and I led the Green River Basin side of those projects.
So it's really interesting. I want to go back just for a second into this fly ash idea that you were pushing, because for folks who might not be familiar, when we refer to fly ash, it's most of the ash that comes from a coal-fired power plant generally. And why we would be looking at that for the School of Energy Resources really is a few different reasons. One is you're finding elevated concentrations of really important critical minerals and rare earths. But even for our minerals industry, our coal sector, the ash around the nation can be a liability. And so if we could find other uses or way to use it, we've really developed a new resource and done it in a step that can support the coal industry and be an environmental remediation technique. So there's a lot of different reasons to work on this. So in terms of what we're doing now, where you see the program going, is there anything you want to add, Tyler?
I can add some things about where the program is going. So, as Davin mentioned, we just wrapped up these 2 CORCM Phase 1 projects that were basin focused. We were just notified of award for CORCM 2 projects. So we are the primary recipient for Region 4, which is Eastern Wyoming and the Great Plains and Interior Highlands region. And then we are the key subrecipient for Region 6, which is Western Wyoming and the Rocky Mountain region. So we will continue to work on very similar lines of research that we did in the first phase of the CORCMs. Additionally, we're working on some process-focused technologies with the National Energy Technology Laboratory and other universities. And importantly, we're trying to grow the catalog of resource assessments in the state of Wyoming. So that involves everything from lithium, which we have a project coming up later this year, to uranium, to looking at potential co-production of industrial materials in the state of Wyoming.
What do you mean? Just explain, what does it mean to grow the resource assessment? So
part of this CORCM goal, the Critical Minerals Initiative, is they're trying to assemble a national prospectus of materials that can be used in the domestic supply chain. So when we talk about growing, we're looking at all different sources, everything from coal to fly ash to produced waters to mine tailings, to see if any of these materials host economic concentrations of rare earth elements or critical minerals.
I love that. And I think you can see even just in what you're talking about in that explanation, this is research. It's a great place for the university and the School of Energy Resources to be really focused, but there is an end goal here. And because this is public funding, these data are going to be available. So we're really trying to look at all the potential resources where we might be able to get some of these minerals that are so important to our nation. So we've used the term, I think, conventional and unconventional or secondary for rare earth element resources. So can you talk about what are those different terms mean? Who wants to take that? You, Davin?
Maybe we start with conventional. That's, okay. I think, the traditional source for a lot of metals, critical minerals, rare earth elements included. Those tend to be what you'd picture, with a metals mine, you have an ore body, you have a hole in the ground, and you're processing metals out of it. There are technologies associated with that, so separation, concentration, that are known. These are high technology readiness levels. So these are existing industries. So they are coined conventional. I think Tyler might have more to say on that. What we look at, CORCMs and these other projects here at SER are largely on the unconventional side. These are less understood in terms of total potential resource. They have gaps in technology, whether that be in the front end processing or downstream. So these are in development. These are prospects that are not necessarily that traditional ore body, this place in a mountainside where you would dig for gold, for example.
And we have examples of conventional projects moving forward in the state that maybe people have heard about.
Correct. The two big projects in the state are the Bear Lodge project, which is located near Upton, Wyoming, and then the Halleck Creek project, which is located near Wheatland, Wyoming.
And so then what we're looking at primarily is the term unconventional. Okay, so let's talk about what is meant by domestic supply chain. And Tyler, or Davin, why don't you take that one?
So the domestic supply chain, we're speaking about what's going on in the U.S. with critical minerals specifically. And with rare earth elements, that's from the source in the ground or waste stream, wherever we're looking at that, whether it's conventional or unconventional, all the way through to the final product. So we're talking about the resource, we're talking about everything in between to get that to a final product. There's a lot involved, and the supply chain is quite complex. So you can connect a Wyoming resource, for example, to a multitude of industries downstream, potential users, electric vehicles, for example, Department of Defense technologies, your cell phone. And it's a long series in the chain to get that resource to that final product. So we're talking about the entire system involved there.
I'd just like to add that the domestic supply chain is the central goal of this critical minerals initiative. We being the U.S., no longer wants to rely on foreign entities for the import of these resources. So as Davin pointed out, everything from upstream, midstream to downstream, we are trying to build out currently.
So what are some current and near future challenges that you see for the rare earth element industry and the supply chain?
Well, first off, there is no domestic supply chain currently. We are in an R&D state. We are trying to build that out. I would say additionally that we are awaiting community readiness. Luckily, here in Wyoming, we have a lot of community buy-in, but that's not always the case for other states and other communities elsewhere. So bringing everyone up to speed and what's going to need to be involved for this domestic supply chain. Additionally, we have issues with notoriously slow permitting for conventional resources, in the example of Bear Lodge or Halleck Creek project.
Okay, so speaking of permitting, what do you understand about the new executive order? I think it's focused on, speeding up that process.
Well, I first want to start with, we are just geologists here, but we did talk to a policy expert and tried to absorb some of what she knew. So you're referring to the executive order titled Immediate Measures to Increase American Mineral Production. As you mentioned, this executive order sounds like it is intended to fast-track permitting. It is going to involve more selection of potential projects from secretaries of agencies, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Energy, Secretary of the Interior, and then them, along with the chairman of the National Energy Dominance Council, are going to basically create a priority list for critical minerals, as well as uranium, gold, potash, and other industrial materials in the U.S.
Okay, and I really appreciate that you went and reached out. And I'm just a quick shameless plug that I think this is one of the things that makes our work so, first of all, enjoyable and also impactful here at the School of Energy Resources is that we do have folks with all these varying expertise. So super glad that you were able to reach out to one of our attorneys and ask about that. And you probably felt, first of all, never say just a geologist. If anyone's going to make that joke, it's me.
Okay, fair.
Just kidding. But also, like there's a lot of actually jargon in the legal world also. So now you know how everyone feels when you say all the words about the geology. So, okay. So talk about which challenges your research is focused on solving.
I'm just going to start with all of them. So,
we'll solve them all.
as you had just mentioned, SCR has a diversity of expertise in these projects in critical minerals, rare earths that we're working on, whether it be Core CM, other projects with Wyoming stakeholders, or the federal government. We are identifying those lesser developed links in the supply chain. That could be resource, technology, policy, regulatory considerations, or suggestions around that. That could be investment and finance, looking at the markets for these or how to develop segments of that. So Core CM specifically, we are working on all of those aspects. So as geologists, we are focused on prioritizing resources, especially in Wyoming. What's available, what is most concentrated, what is highest volume, what is the easiest to extract and process, what can we bring to the forefront and start building U.S. domestic supply chain from the front end first. In that, where are the technology gaps? Where do we not understand how to develop a resource into a final product? So China right now is the only place to really process the final rare earth product for individual species. So that's an obvious gap we can try to fill now, develop that technology. Permitting and regulatory policy, that obviously has to change. We need to make suggestions there. If we wait 20 years to get one of these resources online, that's not helpful when we need a supply chain in the U.S. today.
Or yesterday.
Yeah. Right.
And I think Wyoming really is leaning into this space. And of course, we have the resources. And our focus is helping the state of Wyoming and its industry sector. So how does Wyoming fit into all this?
That's a great question. So due to the existing resources that we have, both unconventional and the potential for unconventional resources, the existing technology, how those technologies pair with those resources, the community buy-in, and especially the existing infrastructure and industry in the state, we truly have an opportunity to become a focal point in the domestic supply chain for the United States.
And so we've talked about it a little bit already, but specific to Wyoming, let's just revisit what are our resources? Like what can we build on?
So the conventional resources, again, the two big conventional projects are the Bear Lodge project, which involves not only the resource but some processing. That's in Upton, Wyoming. And then the Halleck Creek project, which is located near Wheatland, Wyoming, large resource and developing processing technologies.
And on unconventional side, we have, I would argue, an immense possibility in Wyoming. The Powder River Basin coals we've studied for 10 years now do exhibit promising rare earth element values across the basin. The fly ash resource is significant. Wyoming coal is exported across the U.S. We are the largest producer of coal in the United States. We have some of the largest coal mines in the world, and they bear rare earth, so that fly ash is a tremendous resource. We have other industry partners. Wyoming is an extractive state. All of those industries have waste streams that should benefit the U.S. supply chain for critical minerals. A lot of those bear rare earths. I won't name specifics because of NDAs and some of the partners we work with. We have a workforce and an infrastructure that is very unique for the United States. We have large mines, we have the infrastructure to support that, and we have communities familiar with extractive industry processes.
Familiar and supportive.
Absolutely, very supportive. In the core CMs, we've seen tremendous support across the state.
Additionally, I think that we should acknowledge some of the work that's happening at Ramaco at the Brook Mine, which is located near Sheridan, Wyoming. They are working with the National Energy Technology Laboratory to develop a process whereby they are extracting rare earths from the coal itself. So
great. So let's say we can get this industry up and running. How is this going to benefit the state of Wyoming?
Well, first off, I would say that this is a national security issue. Hundreds of different products require the critical minerals and rare earth elements as components or use in their manufacture. Wyoming has the opportunity to play a significant role for bolstering national security. Additionally, there's tremendous potential to create jobs and revenue. Davin mentioned coal and its ash byproduct as a potential source of co-production of rare earth elements. The coal industry in Wyoming, which provides more than 40% of the thermal coal to the United States of America and is shipped to between 25 and 30 states depending on the year, it creates more than 5,500 jobs that add almost $700 million to state and local governments. Our colleagues at the Center for Business and Economic Analysis did some work, and they found that if there was a 10% increase in coal production, potentially with emphasis on the rare earth element co-production, then that would create almost 1,000 jobs and more than $75 million in tax revenue to Wyoming.
So what can Wyoming do? That's all on the production side, but what can we do to help bolster the links in the domestic supply chain? Because it doesn't help if we just produce these materials and then have to ship them off to China to be processed and made into end products. So how can we get into the other parts of domestic supply chain?
Exactly, and well said, Holly. We don't want to be dependent on shipping off our resource elsewhere to do the processing and manufacture. So we've kind of been talking all around this with the resources that are in place, with the industry and infrastructure that are in place. Wyoming and the adjacent states in the Rocky Mountains and the Great Plains and Interior Highlands have an incredible opportunity to form an ecosystem of interconnected technology innovation centers that will bolster each of those individual links in the domestic supply chain of critical minerals and rare earth elements. This requires things like just educating our community and understanding what role these elements play and what we can do to increase production in this state.
So let's also talk about, I think one of the things we try really hard to do is to have robust outreach and engagement opportunities around this and basically anything we work on here at the School of Energy Resources. You know, we're working for the state and we're proud of what we do, and we want to engage with communities that might host some of these projects, also work on workforce development. So let's talk about that for a minute. So what kind of UW-sponsored activities can folks learn more about this, and what opportunities are there out in the future?
So, great question. There are copious opportunities. First off, I want to throw a nod to the folks in the Science Initiative and their K through 12 roadshow. They go around the state and they have developed curricula that are focused on individual elements, mining of those elements, how the mining industry plays a role in their community. Additionally, Davin and Dr. Aaron Phillips were a part of these community forums for the first phase of Core CM, and we plan on continuing those as we move into future phases. Additionally, Dr. Phillips is hosting the Critical Minerals Leadership Academy later this summer, 2025, where they are inviting graduate students and early career professionals to come and participate and figure out what roles they could play in the critical minerals domestic supply chain development. Lastly, there is a program that is happening led by Dr. Jake Hoshard in the Hobb School at the Ucross Ranch in Wyoming early this summer.
Great. And I think, we've been talking about it throughout this entire presentation, but I appreciate, I just want to call attention to the fact that we're working with all these different groups and really appreciate all their support in helping us both on the research side and getting the word out. So what about student opportunities?
Yeah, students are critical to the future of this work. Both in the past, we've had great successes there, currently on our projects and in the future. So Core CMs, we bring quite a bit of funding in. We've already mentioned those require a great deal of diversity and expertise across campus. So we have opportunities for students, engineering, geology, Center for Business Economic Analysis, and others. We do stakeholder outreach and education. We do things with engineering and some of the programs they have there. So law school as well, I need to mention that especially. So we have opportunities with students on these projects, and we hope to develop those. With the new Core CMs, those opportunities will only grow in every one of those categories we've talked about today. We're looking at adding annual student projects to bolster those projects here at SER, and those would collaborate with experts across campus.
Great. So where do you expect to see the most growth in the rare earth element supply chain in the next decade?
Right now, we're identifying those gaps. So in phase 1 of Core CM, we've identified some preliminarily. The big one is bringing these unconventional rare earth resources up to speed now as soon as we can, fast track those opportunities. So that includes finalizing assessment and characterization of those resources, especially in Wyoming. Those will contribute to the national prospectus DOE is assembling. Each year that will be updated. Technology advancement. We talked about policy and regulatory and investment side, understanding economically how to do this and where to focus those investments properly. And I think a large part of it is bringing in stakeholder education and communities to understand why we are developing unconventional resources alongside these currently developing conventional resources. And if we think about China and what they are able to do market-wise in controlling rare earth markets, it's quite the elegant solution to stand up unconventional potential resources of these with industries that are not beholden to Chinese influence. So if we're producing rare earths out of our coal industry, China can essentially play with the markets as they have to manipulate them, and we're still producing rare earths because we're still producing coal here in Wyoming.
Sure. That's a really good point, by the way.
That was a perfect answer.
Yeah. Okay, so where do you see like the next step or hurdle for rare earth element research or the supply chain development?
This involves commitment in the realization that this is truly in the nascent stages of developing a domestic supply chain for critical minerals and rare earth elements. It is a national security issue, and we are way past the time for discussing and identifying the different gaps in this supply chain and really need to move forward with quick and effective action.
So how should Wyoming set itself up for success?
Well, Core CM excellence is the first thing. Davin and Dr. Phillips demonstrated a level of commitment and excellence to Core CM Phase 1 work. I would say that the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources is recognized as a national expert in this Core CM work. We now have the opportunity to grow this for the entire state of Wyoming and for the surrounding states. So we have a tremendous opportunity, as I've mentioned, to become a nexus of links in the supply chain. One thing I would want to say is that Davin and I tried to do our best to answer all of these questions, but inevitably we missed some things. So I know that both he and I would encourage anybody that's interested to just try and grow their knowledge base of critical minerals, rare earth elements, and the links in that domestic supply chain.
Anything you want to add?
I would emphasize collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
The more we develop, the more durable and adaptable our industry will be domestically. Luckily in Wyoming, we have that ability to be very diverse in producing rare earth elements and the rest of the supply chain. And I would encourage collaboration in developing all of it. We don't know what opportunities will float to the top unless we start to research as much as we can. And when I mean research, it's not just the geology, it's everything.
Yep. And we have to say thank you to the state legislature for funding folks, both in the 2 faculty in the College of Engineering and Physical Sciences, and then 2 research professionals here at the School of Energy Resources. And they really will be focused on that separations process, the value add side, which is something that maybe we have not invested in as much. But to your point, especially with rare earths, it's really a call to action. You can't just focus on developing the mineral resource, because you have to do something with it here. And we have to kind of re-onshore the technology. So I think that the future's bright, and we have the resources we need. Pun intended. We have lots of different kinds of resources, but we have the resources we need here at the School of Energy Resources to continue working on this with our partners across the University of Wyoming, through industry and also really through the nation. So I have to thank both of you so much for being leaders in this space, because I appreciate what you said, Tyler, but it really is you and Dr. and Phillips. You guys have really set us up for success. So I just want to thank you for all you do for us here at the School of Energy Resources, for the university, for the state, and for the nation, really. So thank you so much. And thanks for doing the podcast.
Well, thank you, Holly. It's been a pleasure, and it's been an honor, honestly, to work in SCR on these projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Energy Frontier, the Wyoming Landscape, the podcast that highlights the School of Energy Resources at the University of Wyoming. You can expect a new episode of Energy Frontier every Wednesday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. See you next time.